So we're going to talk about the glorious throne of God today. We are in the Revelation series, and anyone who has ever done an extensive study on Revelation will know that it is filled to the brim with references from all over the scriptures. So we're going to elaborate on some of the elements that are in Revelation over the coming weeks. So like just studying the throne, it's like, what, are we going to go through chapters 4 through 6? Or that's not really how Revelation is set up. Revelation is set up to where it talks about something here, and then a few chapters later it talks about the exact same thing, and then a few chapters later it gives you a little bit more detail on it. And so it's scattered all throughout the book. And so we're going to take an element and extract the scriptures so that we can look into the message that's being communicated through the book of Revelation. Does that make sense? Oh my gosh, we could go on endlessly about the exact timing of bowls and seals and trumpets, but one thing is clear: judgment and wrath are being poured out on the entire world. That's clear. God has a wrath that he pours out, and Satan has wrath that he pours out as the persecution of God's people. The element that we are going to focus on today is the glorious throne. So the word thronos, which is just so fun to say, feel free to say it, thronos. It's mentioned 48 times in the book of Revelation. So the throne is mentioned 48 times in the book of Revelation. Important? Yes. So we're going to talk about how the Bible describes this glorious throne, how it gets established, the battle that rages on as the wicked enthrone themselves, and how the Lord overthrows them, and his intentions to share the throne with the righteous. Oh, that's exciting. It's fitting to start where we ended last week. Would you throw Revelation 3:21 up? Listen to this. I don't know if you've actually broken this down for a second. It says, "The one who conquers, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne." So we get to sit on the throne of God. We get to sit on the throne with Jesus. For me, if I had like a tiny throne, you ever come in late to a meeting and they're like, grab a chair from over there, and it's like the crappiest chair? So you're like, okay, and you pull it up and it's like, I'm happy to be here, just, And that's the way that I thought. If that's the way that it was in heaven, that I get a terrible tiny throne, maybe like one of the legs is missing, I'm happy. I didn't even think I would get a seat. I thought I'd be on the floor. But we're going to be sitting with Jesus on the throne. That's a mind-blowing thought. Does that appeal to anyone besides me? Yes. Let's discover how truly glorious this throne is. We're going to give some descriptions of this throne from various scriptures. So we're going to start in Ezekiel. So go to Ezekiel 1. All right, starting in verse 4. It says, "As I looked, behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, and a great cloud with brightness around it, fire flashing forth continually. And in the midst of the fire, as it were, gleaming metal. And from the midst of it came the likeness of 4 living creatures. And this was their appearance. They had a human likeness, but each had 4 faces. And each of them had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like burnished bronze. Under their wings on their 4 sides they had human hands, and the 4 had their faces and their wings thus. Their wings touched one another. Each one of them went straight forward without turning as they went. As for the likeness of their faces, each had a human face. The 4 had the face of a lion on the right side, the 4 had the face of an ox on the left side, and the 4 had the face of an eagle. Such were their faces. And their wings were spread out above. Each creature had 2 wings, each of which touched the wing of another, while 2 covered their bodies, and each went straight forward. Wherever the Spirit would go, they went without turning as they went. So it's saying they're going straight all the time. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, like the appearance of torches moving to and fro among the living creatures. And the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning, and the living creatures darted to and fro like the appearance of a flash of lightning. So these creatures are going forward in every direction, and they move like lightning, fast, right? And they have the face of a lion, a man, an eagle, and an ox. Does that sound familiar to anybody? A lion, a man, an eagle, and an ox. Bring up the tribes. So to anybody that was watching this or listening to this, the idea of a lion, that's the standard or the banner of the tribe of Judah. An ox, that's the banner of the tribe of Ephraim. A man, that's Reuben. An eagle, that's Dan. And these were the head tribes of each direction. So when you're looking if we were looking at from an aerial view, on one side to the east would be Judah. To the west would be Ephraim. To the south, Reuben, and then to the north, Dan. You would see Dan, Reuben, Judah, Ephraim. And there would be like a cross, and in the middle of it would be the tabernacle. This is in the desert. So when they were in the desert, if you looked from an aerial view, these tribes were at the different directions, and then in the very center of it was the tabernacle, which is where the Ark of the Covenant was, which was the throne of God. So when Ezekiel is seeing this picture, he's seeing this heavenly representation of what was happening on earth as the tribes moved through the desert. And they followed wherever the Spirit went, right? And now he's looking at these four living creatures going wherever the Spirit leads. So surely anybody that's reading this is not thinking, these are crazy creatures. But like, wow, this reminds me of the tribes, the people of God. Look at 15 through 21. Now as I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the earth beside the living creatures, one for each of the four of them. As for the appearance of the wheels and their construction, their appearance was like the gleaming of beryl. And the four had the same likeness, their appearance and construction being as it were a wheel within a wheel. When they went in any of their four directions without turning as they went. There's no turning in them. And their rims, where's Randy Sheridan? Were tall and awesome. And the rims of all four were full of eyes all around. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went beside them. And when the living creatures rose from the earth, the wheels rose. Wherever the Spirit wanted to go, seems to be a consistent theme, they went, and the wheels rose along with them. For the Spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. When those went, these went. And when those stood, these stood. And when those rose from the earth, the wheels rose along with them. For the Spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Think about the way that the Spirit moves and the way that the creatures follow. There's intentionality. It's purposeful, and they're dependent on the Spirit as they move. It's the picture that Ezekiel is seeing of this throne and all the things that are happening around the throne. The way that it moves is speaking to him a picture, because ultimately what we're going to see is this is the throne of God. So the way that it moves is really the way that God moves. The way that the creatures follow is really how creation is supposed to follow him. He's looking at all of these things and he's beholding the way that it moves. He's beholding the glory of it. Let's look at verses 22 through 25. Over the heads of the living creatures there was the likeness of an expanse, shining like awe-inspiring crystal, spread out above their heads. And under the expanse their wings were stretched out straight, one toward another. And each creature had two wings covering its body. And when they went, I heard the sound of their two wings like the sound of many waters, like the sound of the Almighty, a sound of tumult like the sound of an army. When they stood still, they let down their wings, and there came a voice from above the expanse over their heads. When they stood still, they let down their wings. this expanse. I want you to think about it for a second. It's trying to describe this expanse under God, and it's saying it's like crystal. Can you throw Exodus 24:10 up? And they saw the God of Israel. There was under his feet, as it were, a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clearness. What you're going to see is there's an expanse under God that is perfectly clear and still, so that it looks like stone. Look at Revelation 4:6. And before the throne there was, as it were, a sea of glass, like crystal. And around the throne, on each side of the throne, are 4 living creatures. Remember them? Now they're not operating with wheels, they're stationed. Are 4 living creatures full of eyes in front and behind. Go to the next one, 15:2. And I saw what appeared to be a sea of glass now mingled with fire. And also those who had conquered the beast and its image and the number of its name standing beside the sea of glass with harps of gold, or harps of God, in their hands. So you have this sea of glass, but it is not glass. Back in Ezekiel's time, glass was not very common. What that was referring to is the stillness and the transparency of the expanse underneath him. Have you ever heard water or a lake being referred to as like glass? This is more what we're talking about. Not a giant block of metal or a giant block of, I don't know, whatever. But more like a stillness and a transparency and a clarity. And that was like the foundation underneath his throne. I want to give you a hint here. In Revelation 17:1, we're going to get to it later in this sermon, we're going to see the great prostitute who opposes God. I want to tell you the words that were coming forth this morning, dead on. Even the verse that he read about Babylon, fallen, I'm going to go over that. So God is speaking a message to this body. This is for today. So in Revelation 17:1, we see this great prostitute that opposes God. She's sitting on many waters. This is her. She is enthroned upon many waters. And what we see in Jeremiah 51:42 is it actually refers to these waters as tumultuous. So the waters underneath the great prostitute that she's seated on are chaotic and tumultuous. But underneath the throne of God, it is still as glass, transparent and clear. Interesting to think about what she's enthroned upon and what he's enthroned upon. Pastor Peter shared with me from Isaiah 9:6 that Jesus is the Prince of Peace. That word for prince is archon. Does anybody remember the Heavenly Calling series? He is the archon of peace. It's amazing that he has a still as glass expanse underneath his throne, isn't it? Makes me think of the story where the disciples are on the boat and the waters start going crazy. And then he wakes up and actually rebukes them because they started to go crazy with it. That's not what he's enthroned upon. There is someone who's enthroned upon that, and it's not him. Don't go crazy with the crazy, right? We are meant to be still and at peace. And I would add, transparent. Look at verses 26 through 28. And above the expanse over their heads, there was the likeness. I'm going to give you, he uses likeness or appearance 13 times in 3 verses. Because he's about to try and describe to you God. And above the expanse over their heads, there was the likeness of a throne. He's saying, look, I'm not saying it was this, I'm saying it was like this. In appearance like sapphire, and seated above the likeness of a throne was a likeness with a human appearance. And upward from what had the appearance of his waist, I saw as it were gleaming metal, like the appearance of fire enclosed all around. And downward from what had the appearance of his waist, I saw as it were the appearance of fire. And there was brightness around him, like the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud on the day of rain. So was the appearance of the brightness all around. Such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of God. And when I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard the voice of one speaking. Ezekiel, this is his best attempt to describe to you God on his throne. He sees it and he falls over because it's so glorious. Look at Daniel. Just throw up 7, 9 through 10. It says, as I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. Still has wheels at this point. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. There are fiery flames coming out of this throne and wheels of burning fire. The throne is in the midst of a court of judgment with open books and innumerable people serving and standing before him with flames issuing from his throne. This is a sight that we can't comprehend. What we're doing is we're taking the evidence and the clues from the word and trying to put it together and just think, I'm going to sit on that? Right. Look at Revelation 4. Anybody ever had to ride a basic economy in a plane before? Oh, man. You think about a long flight, and it's like, oh, it's really tempting. Then you look at the price for first class, and it's like, I could never do that. This is the throne that we get to sit on forever. Verses 2 through 6. At once I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne stood in heaven, with one seated on the throne, and he who sat there had the appearance of jasper and carnelian. And around the throne there was a rainbow that had the appearance of an emerald. Around the throne there were 24 thrones. This is new. And seated on the thrones were 24 elders, clothed in white garments, with golden crowns on their heads. From the throne came flashes of lightning, and rumblings, and peals of thunder. And before the throne were burning 7 torches of fire, which are the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne there was, as it were, a sea of glass, like crystal. This is the rainbow again that's around the throne. It's an appearance of a rainbow. No wonder the enemy wants it. It surrounds the throne. Flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder. These descriptions, flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, appear several times throughout the book of Revelation. And they happen every time you see the throne. Flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder. This is reminiscent of Exodus 25:37, where you see the 7 torches. Moses is commanded to make a menorah with 7 torches on it that stands before the throne. In verse 6, we see the sea of glass and the 4 living creatures. And we see the elders and the creatures give him glory constantly. These next few, let's just do rapid fire. Throw up 5, 6. It says, and between the throne and the 4 living creatures and among the elders, I saw a lamb standing. So now what else is there? A lamb standing among the elders, as though it had been slain, with 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. So now we have the 24 thrones with the elders. We have the 4 living creatures. We have the 7 torches. We have the lamb looking as though it had been slain. We have thousands upon thousands standing around the throne. This is what you would behold at this point in Revelation as you're looking. Revelation 7:9, it says, after this I looked, And behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands. Innumerable people from all over the world are now standing around the throne with palm branches in their hands. 20 verse 11. Then I saw a great white throne. Now it seems different than the throne from before, and him who was seated on it. From his presence, earth and sky fled away, and no place was found for them. Let me tell you something real quick before we move on. What you see throughout the word is that at least the description of the throne is progressive. Meaning, it's not saying that it had to have changed all these different elements, but that at the very least, the writer did not include every element when he gave the description. But by the time that we get here, we know at least these four living creatures are not carrying around the throne anymore. It's now fixed. And so at least the way that it moves is changing. To going from one place to another to now being in a fixed place. Established. Look at verse 22, verse 1. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb. As if all that weren't enough, now the throne issues a spring of living water that goes, and as you read about it in Ezekiel, this water gets deeper and deeper and wider and bigger. The farther away that it gets, and it brings life to dead places. This is the throne of God. This is just the appearance of the likeness of the throne of God. This is the nature of the authority and power of the throne of God. In the same way, those who have enthroned God on their hearts. Is that anybody in here? Anybody in here enthroned God on their hearts? You should grow in displaying his glory. The way that you display his glory should be growing. His throne's not stagnant. You shouldn't be stagnant. The revelation of his glory is not fixed. It is ever expanding. And so the glory that you display in your life of God and of his rulership over your heart should be expanding. Is that happening in your life? Is his glory being put more on display the older that you get, the longer that you go? I love that where Ezekiel began by describing the creatures around his throne, by the time we get to Revelation, the description is not only of elders, creatures, angels, torches, lightning, and people, but also of living water flowing to the lowest places on earth. I want to know how a throne like this gets established. That's what I want to know. Y'all want to search the scriptures real quick and see? How do I establish a throne like this right here? How did his throne get established? Now, I want to tell you this. If you have not listened to the Archon series, I am not going to go into how God's throne gets established in the heavens. But I would tell you to listen to that series for an explanation of it, because it has to do with the purging that took place in the heavens. God has always been at the highest level, always. Okay? By the way, in the Bible, the height of a throne shows its power and authority over the people. And his throne is in the highest place. But we're not going to go through the heavens and show how he purged the heavens to establish his throne in the heavens. We're going to talk about how his throne gets established here on earth. Because what we see is this is a progressive establishing, going from the heavens, and he is bringing his rule and reign to this earth. As in heaven, so on earth. Turn to 2 Samuel 7. This process of his throne being established on earth is described with total clarity throughout the scriptures. And the promise of the establishment of his throne here on earth was first given to David. It's called the Davidic Covenant. We're going to read about that right now. Starting in verse 12. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish, say establish, his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. Not for 40 years, not for 70 years, not for 100 years, forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When, or another version says, if he does wrong, I will punish him with a rod wielded by men, with floggings inflicted by human hands. But my love will never be taken away from him as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Did you catch that? A king had to be removed so that this throne could be established. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. So look at the elements of this covenant. Can you see that? It says, I will appoint a place. This is in verse 10. This is what the Lord tells David. I will appoint a place. I'm going to appoint a place for my people. Now, if you've always had a place, I've lived in the same home for 40 years. Well, then that promise is maybe it's not too exciting for you. But if you've been roaming everywhere, been attacked on every side for generations, and never really truly known a home, the promise of a place to belong where you're not moved, where you can stay forever, that would be pretty appealing. And he says, I will appoint a place. And then he says, I will give you rest from your enemies. Who gives you rest from your enemies? The cops? Your guns? Your money? Who gives you rest from your enemies? The Lord promises he will give David rest from his enemies. That's someone who can deliver. I will establish his throne. I will establish his throne. What you have here now, David, a man after God's own heart, a man who fights the Lord's battles. He's being told, David, I am going to establish your descendants' throne forever. I will defeat all of his enemies, and you will have your very own place where you're not moved from. Does that sound good to anybody? I want to have a place where I belong, where I'm free from my enemies, where I'm with the Lord in his presence, and where I don't have to worry anymore. No more worry, no more pain, no more crying, no more tears. I want a place like that. These are the hints that he's giving to David. Look at Psalm 103:19. We're going to go rapid fire through these two. Look at this. The Lord has established his throne in the heavens, and his kingdom rules over all. So that's already settled. The Lord already rules over the heavens, and his kingdom rules over all. Now it's about people acknowledging it. Now it's about people recognizing it. Keep going. Clouds and thick darkness are all around him. What do you see? Righteousness and justice are the foundation of his throne. We're talking about the throne this morning. Right now we're focused on how it gets established. It gets established by righteousness and justice. What do you know? Those of us in here, what do you know about righteousness and justice? What do you know? When I think about righteousness, this is how I carry out righteousness. This is, if I were teaching a kid, this is what I would teach him righteousness is. Justice. Do you talk about justice? Do you know about justice? Do you teach your kids about justice? What is justice? Because these are the foundations of his throne. This is what his throne is established on. Let's look at the next one. Isaiah 9:7. By the way, if his throne is established on righteousness and justice in the heavens, how do you think it'll be established here on earth? Righteousness and justice. When those things prevail, we're laying the foundation for his throne. Isaiah 9:7. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end. On the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and uphold it with what? Justice and righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. Look at Isaiah 16:5. We're going to 15. 16:5. We're going to add one more thing to it. Two more things. In love, a throne will be established. In love, a throne will be established. In faithfulness, a man will sit upon it. What do you know about faithfulness? What do you know about faithfulness? Is it the cry of your heart to be faithful? Is it the cry of your heart to be loving? One from the house of David, one who in judging seeks justice and speeds the cause of righteousness. There are additional elements being added here: love, faithfulness, righteousness, justice. Proverbs 20:28. Love and faithfulness keep a king safe. Through love, his throne is made secure. The way that the throne of God will be established here on earth is as love and faithfulness and righteousness and justice increase. When these things increase in our lives, when you increase in the love of God, in faithfulness towards God and towards his commands, in righteousness by obeying his commands and teaching others to obey his commands, and justice in not showing favoritism, but actually helping the poor and the weak and the needy and those who are hurting and can't speak up for themselves, in those things, in the increase of those things, the throne of God is established here on earth. As you increase in your heart with love and faithfulness, with righteousness and justice, then he is enthroned all the more on your heart. And in that way, you are acknowledging his dominion, and that is his kingdom come to earth. We are walking around on the earth, living under his dominion, acknowledging his authority, because he already rules over all, the scriptures show. But we are helping establish his throne here on the earth. And the one who set the example and laid the foundation is Jesus. He laid the foundation for us. And we see, getting to share in that glory, in Ephesians 2:20, the apostles and the prophets are the foundation. Proverbs 29:14. If a king faithfully judges the poor, his throne will be established forever. When you think of a king, don't think of someone else. Think of yourself. And you hear these words, the king. I love this one, Proverbs 25:5. Take away the wicked from the presence of the king, and his throne will be established in righteousness. That's relationships right there, isn't it? You got some wicked people in your life? Oh, I've been ministering to them for years. Why are you becoming more like them than they are like you? Why, when you get around them, you don't feel comfortable talking about Jesus the way you would with anyone in this room? That should be a proof for you. Yeah, when I get around them, we usually don't pray. We're not in the Word. I don't like to talk about Jesus. But that's just the kind of relationship that we have. Take away the wicked from the presence of the king, and his throne will be established in righteousness. You know who wrote this? Solomon. You know who told him to do that? His father, David. Proverbs 16:12. It's an abomination to kings to do evil, for the throne is established by righteousness. So a king's throne is established through love, justice, righteousness, and faithfulness. We see through the covenant made with David that God's intention was to partner with man to establish his throne forever on the earth. It would be done through love, faithfulness, righteousness, and justice. Not through you amassing enough money, getting enough people to like you, being able to win every fight, but through righteousness. Through righteousness. That's how we're going to establish the kingdom of God here on the earth. You know, sometimes when we begin talking about the end times, we've been talking about how bad everything's going to get and things like that. You can forget that when he comes back, his bride has made herself ready. You can never forget that. It is not a time for us to freak out and lose our stuff, but to recognize, no, it's time to step up. We were born for this. Look at Romans 3:21. But now, apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been made known, to which the law and the prophets testify. This righteousness is given through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. There is no difference between Jew and Gentile, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and all are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that came by Christ Jesus. God presented Christ as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of his blood to be received by faith. He did this to demonstrate his righteousness, because in his forbearance he had left the sins committed beforehand unpunished. He did it to demonstrate his righteousness at the present time, so as to be just and the one who justifies those who have faith in Jesus. Today I want to tell you this message is, I believe, first and foremost, primarily a salvation message. We're talking about the throne of God. Ultimately, the place where we are going is you have someone enthroned on your heart right now. Right now, you have someone enthroned on your heart. You are following someone's dominion. You are operating under someone's rules and the way that they want things to go. And salvation is when you depose that wicked king and you set the rightful, righteous, just, true, and faithful king on that throne in his place. And I want to tell you, the Lord is making it more and more clear who we follow, who you follow. He'll make it more and more clear. Psalm 37, 3-6 says, trust in the Lord and do good. You want to know how to do this? You want to know how to do righteousness, how to do justice, how to do faithfulness, how to do love? Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord. This word, delight, means to be pliable and soft before him. Delight yourself in the Lord. Be pliable and soft. That means at the very least, when an altar call starts to be given and you're being told to repent, your first response is, me, Lord? Is it me? Do you want me to repent? Soft and pliable. When a call is made for giving, your first response is, Lord, would you like me to give? How much would you like me to give? What would you want me to do? When an opportunity to serve is given, your thought is, yes, I will serve. I would be happy to. Soft and pliable. The opposite of that would be, someone going to do it? Someone going to say something? It's not me. They must be talking to someone else. This call to repentance must be for someone else. This call for giving, this call for serving must be for someone else. Not soft and pliable. Delight yourself in the Lord. And it doesn't just show up in church. I'm not trying to get anything from you. I don't want anything from you. I'm talking about how we live before the Lord and bring his dominion to this earth. Commit your way to the Lord and trust in him, and he will act. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light and your justice as the noonday. The next one is the occupied throne. Let's talk a little bit about someone else being on this throne. Y'all with me still? Yeah. Unfortunately, thrones in the Bible aren't left empty, waiting for a faithful, loving, righteous, and just king to take them. You don't see empty thrones just waiting around. Is this seat taken? No, man, go ahead. No, people kill for these things. People wait decades to inherit these things. They're too valuable to leave empty and vacant. The Baker Encyclopedia of the Bible defines the throne as an elevated ceremonial chair. This is what I said earlier, whose height symbolizes the importance and authority of the person seated on it. Meaning the higher it is, the more authoritative and important the person sitting on it is. And God's throne is in the heavens. It would come to symbolize the kingship and the very kingdom itself. Meaning if you said this person took the throne, the kingdom now belongs to them. They now are king. You say someone takes the throne, that's what it means. This person now has authority and power to rule and reign when someone takes the throne. So let's look at the first time that the word throne is used in the Bible. It's in Genesis 41:40. How many people remember the story of Joseph? Yeah, what a great story. You shall be over my house, this is verse 40, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards the throne will I be greater than you. Now, every time I've ever heard this story, it's always a testimony, isn't it? Because where was Joseph right before this? He was in prison. What's better than prison? Being in second command over Egypt. That's better than being in prison. But I noticed something as I looked at this. This is the very first time that the word throne is mentioned, and that's an important thing. And Pharaoh tells him, only in regards to the throne will I be greater than you. Pharaoh, wicked or righteous? Wicked. So who's still on the throne? Hey, but at least the righteous man gets to be second in command, right? Regardless of what we think about that, look at the very next time that the word throne is used. This is the very next time. And every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the slave girl who is behind the handmill, and the firstborn of the cattle. So regardless if you were okay for Joseph to remain second in command, for the righteous to still be under the control of the wicked, he is not. And his plan is to judge even Pharaoh who sits on his throne by taking his firstborn son. And you know the end of the story. He hurls Pharaoh and his chariots into the sea and destroys them. Because you may be okay with a wicked person sitting on the throne, but he is not. And his intention is to remove the wicked from their high place and to sit himself on the highest seat. Throughout the rest of the scriptures, we are not just dealing with wicked pharaohs, but also kings of Assyria, Babylon, Greece, Rome, continuing on into today. One system in particular has prevailed throughout the scriptures, and that is the system of Babylon. It is referenced 280 times in the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. From beginning to end, it is Babylon. Babylon, Babylon, Babylon. It was established and built by Nimrod. Many believe was the first picture of an antichrist. The Tower of Babel, initiated by these people. Ur of the Chaldees, where Abram was called out of. Babylonia, the Chaldeans, this is Babylon. Babylon existed during Abraham's time. It fell, was resurrected. That's Neo-Babylon. That's the Babylon that you're probably more familiar with, where Nebuchadnezzar ruled over it. Come out of her, my people, was the word that was coming forth. Abraham was called out of Babylon. The Jews were called out of Babylon. By the time we get to Revelation, it says, come out of her, my people. Babylon, Babylon, Babylon. And we see it from beginning to end. It goes by many other names. You can see this. It's referenced 280 times and also goes by other names. But we see a prophecy given about the eventual downfall of Babylon. Look at Isaiah 14, 12 through 14. It says, how you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven, above the stars of God. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. What is Babylon's desire? To be even greater than God. That is what Babylon desires. That's what she wants. She wants to be greater and sit on the throne even higher than his. So the battle for the throne goes back to the beginning. Kings have sought to ascend to the heights and be as God, to have authority and rule over people. In 1 Peter 5:13, we actually see Peter, who is in Rome. He does something interesting. He actually calls Rome Babylon. She who is at Babylon, who is likewise chosen, sends you greetings, and so does Mark, my son. He's in Rome at this time. But he calls Rome Babylon. Why? Because Peter understood, which would later be expanded on in the book of Revelation. He understood that this current system, this empire, this wickedness was no different than Babylon. It was the same. Because it's the same. Can't you see that in this world? These kingdoms that men build for themselves, aren't they all just the same? You watch something new rise up, be in the spotlight for a while, it gets everybody's attention, and then it crumbles. And then something new rises up, has everybody's attention, and then it crumbles. And so goes the kingdom of men. Babylon has been this from the beginning, and it's gone by many other names: Assyria, Egypt, Sodom and Gomorrah, Tyre, Greece, Rome. But it's all under the system of Babylon, and she wants to sit on a throne higher than God's. Look at Revelation 17, 1 and 2. It says, "Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, 'Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immoralities the dwellers on earth have become drunk.'" This is what Dave was speaking out about in prophecy this morning. "And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations." Do you see how it's ascribing all the abomination and prostitution and waywardness and immorality to Babylon? Do you see this? The waters that she is seated and throned upon are people. Verse 15, "And the angel said to me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages." What does this mean? This means that the people have enthroned Babylon on their hearts. That's what it means. She sits enthroned on their hearts. Look at Revelation 18:24. It says, "And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all who have been slain on the earth." Think about that. It's attributing every death, every immorality, all the blood of the saints from the beginning until now, it's attributing to Babylon. And she is enthroned upon the hearts of men all over the world. I'd sure hate to be someone who has Babylon enthroned on their heart, knowing what she's responsible for, knowing what she does to the people she rules over. See, I'm nobody's slave. Never been anyone's slave. That's what the Pharisees told Jesus. We've never been slaves to anyone. We're sons of Abraham. I'm son of God. Soft and pliable before the Lord right now. This worldly system that was being prophesied about and sung about during worship, and they didn't know all where we're going. They're not sitting there going, what next should we do? Singing as the Spirit is leading them. And the Lord is saying, who is enthroned upon your heart? Because there is the system of this world and its ways. And I want to look at this in just a second. Actually, bring it up now. Bring it up a little bit ahead of time. Pull up that enthroning Babylon slide if you can. It's just a little bit down. I want you to see the things that it attributes. Enthroning Babylon. This says the kings and the people committed sexual immorality with her. Does sexual immorality define and rule your life? When something comes in front of your face, and listen, when we talk about masturbation, we talk about pornography, it's not just men in here, there's women. We talk about what the world is feeding you. I want to tell you, the world is training you to be flesh mongrels, to want and to hunger for flesh, to get your body to look like a certain thing, to look at other people whose bodies look like a certain thing. You're attracted and drawn to it. It's in the movies. We know this. It's everywhere. Enthroning Babylon. They committed the sexual immorality with her. It is not disconnected from Babylon. Sexual immorality is not disconnected from enthroning Babylon on your heart. They are connected. Where does this urge come from? Where does this drive come from? It comes from the mother of all prostitutes who is enthroning herself on your heart. That's where it comes from. Not me, Lord. Surely not me. Like Peter said before he denied Jesus 3 times. Are you further along and better and stronger than Peter? Not me, Lord. I would never. Not me. Be sober-minded. Be sober-minded. Grew rich from her luxurious living. Revelation 18:3. I was pierced by this. I look around and I go, how much stuff do I actually need? How much of this stuff do I need? I give myself whatever I want. I want a coffee, I get a coffee. I want a snack, I get a snack. I want to buy some headphones, I buy some headphones. I want shoes, I want clothes. I want to go here, go there, eat this, eat that, do this. And I give myself whatever. How do I know that I'm not being affected? Oh, everybody lives this way. Maybe in this country, not in the majority of the world. This one is crazy. If I could stand on this thing, I can't. Deceived by her drug-related sorcery. When it says sorcery, this is pharmakia. This is drug-related. Are you dependent on drugs? Any kind of drugs for your anxiety, your depression. Are you dependent on substances? It's been a hard day. I need some alcohol. Take the edge off. Are you dependent on substances to help you through hard times? How do you know that she's not creeping up onto the throne to take a seat? These are the exact sins that it specifically lists. Sexual immorality, man. Well, what kind of a standard are we going to set here? Total purity. That's the standard. Don't clap. Just do it. This is, just do it. Grew rich from luxurious living. Open-handed with your stuff for the love of God and for a distinction between us and Babylon. Be open-handed with your precious stuff. But it belongs to me. I worked for it. You be open-handed so that it doesn't own you. Drug-related sorcery. Be very careful. Be very careful about what you give yourself over to and what you need to make it through. Be very careful about what you partner with, because this is something that Babylon uses. It's finally revealed that all the wicked kings of the earth have truly only been puppets to this evil power reigning over the whole world. Puppets. That's all. And I tell you, it's funny to watch different people talk about these secret powers, these shadow governments. I know some of you in here think that. I've talked to you. I know you do. Can I tell you there is one ultimate dark government over all of it? It's not man. It is the mother of all prostitutes and abominations. And the people in her kingdom are just puppets. Look at Isaiah 14. It says, I will rise, verse 22 through 23, you can see it. I will rise up against them, declares the Lord of hosts, and will cut off from Babylon name and remnant, descendants and posterity, declares the Lord, and I will make it a possession of the hedgehog. Oh, it gets better. And pools of water, and I will sweep it with the broom of destruction. That's what my dog thinks my broom is. He's trying to rescue me from the broom of destruction. Look at what great Babylon has turned into. Something to be swept up. That's what happens to this great and elaborate kingdom. Furthermore, Isaiah says in chapter 47, verse 1, "Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for you shall no more be called tender and delicate. Her throne will be taken away. The one who sits enthroned upon the hearts of the people of this world will be destroyed." I'm going to tell you real quick, there is a story about a woman named Thalia and Joash. Joash was a king of the line of David. So he is included in this promise of descendants sitting on the throne forever. And Thalia is the daughter of Jezebel and Ahab. She goes and sets out to kill all of David's family. And she succeeds, except for one, Joash. He was taken by Jedediah and hidden away until he could grow up and was ready to be pronounced king. And then at the right time, while the wicked queen was sitting on her throne, all of a sudden the trumpets blew and the people declared, "Long live the king." And all of a sudden a son of David was revealed. It was thought that he was dead. And he was revealed. And Thalia cries out, "Treason!" And she comes trying to stop him, but she is struck down and removed. This theme plays out over and over and over again. This wicked whore will be struck down, and the rightful son of David will take his place on the throne. Look at Revelation 19, 1 and 2. "After this, I heard what seemed to be the loud voice of a great multitude in heaven, crying out, 'Hallelujah! Salvation and glory and power belong to our God, for his judgments are true and just. For he has judged the great prostitute who corrupted the earth with her immorality and has avenged on her the blood of his servants.' And what will happen after the whore is deposed from her throne?" Look at Revelation 11. And verses 15 through 18. It says, "Then the seventh angel blew his trumpet, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, 'The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever.' And the 24 elders who sit on their thrones before God fell on their faces and worshiped God, saying, 'We give thanks to you, Lord God Almighty, who is and who was, for you have taken your great power and begun to reign. The nations raged, but your wrath came, and the time for the dead to be judged, and for rewarding your servants, the prophets and saints, those who fear your name, both small and great, and for destroying the destroyers of the earth. And we know that there will not be an empty throne." Get Revelation 22:3, just look on the screen. It says, "No longer will there be anything accursed, but the throne of God and of the Lamb will be in it, the city of God, and his servants will worship him." The throne of God and of the Lamb will be here on the earth, actually here, because the foundation will have been laid, the people made ready, the wicked judged, the righteous preserved, and we will surround his throne. This is the ending that all creation has been longing for. God will be enthroned upon the earth. Is this the ending that you are longing for? Is this the ending that you're longing for? Yes, God, just keep. Is this the desire of your heart? It will come to pass, and there is nothing any man can do about it. No man can stop it. You can watch the news and you might start to think, oh no, Does evil actually end up winning? They thought that as he gave his breath at the cross. We have to get it in our minds that this is the way that it goes. It looks like good is being defeated. But in reality, good is not shying away from confronting evil. And it's not afraid to lay down its life. You see, this is not about a politician or an emperor. We're not going to go there. I want to tell you that the whore of Babylon, the woman, is really a culmination. If you look in the book of Proverbs, there's a woman of folly, there's an adulterous woman, and the way that it describes how she behaves and how she acts and the kind of people that go to her, if you culminate all those and then put it in the book of Revelation, she makes up the great prostitute. What you see is that this is nothing new, guys. 3,000 years ago, as Solomon was writing in Proverbs, he knew what he was talking about. Watch out for these kinds of women. And I'm not talking about flesh and blood at this point. There is a seductive call from this world that wants to have your heart. It wants to lure you in. And do you know what happens to the people that creep into her house? They go down to the grave. Today is the day of salvation. I want to tell you that there is a king who is on the throne, enthroned in the heavens, far above every other throne. And he watches as the nations rage and try and make their plans come to pass. Where in futility they say, we're going to ascend and we will become like God. And he laughs. No one can assault his throne. No one can take his glory from him. It belongs to him and him alone. And I want to tell you what today is about. Son of Adam. What today is about is who is enthroned on your heart. Has she reached her claws into your life and enthroned herself, whether you wanted her to or not? And you recognize, yes, these things have permeated my life. Sexual immorality has overtaken me. I am dependent on other things just to make it through. And man, I live a life of luxury. And these things, I think, have me. Today is the day to depose her off the throne and to enthrone the loving, faithful, just, and righteous King on your heart. Revelation 3:21, listen to this again. This is his heart. Revelation 3:21 says, the one who conquers, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. Romans 8:16 and 17 says, the Spirit testifies with us that we are children of God. And if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided that we suffer with him in order that we may also be glorified with him or share in his glory. He wants you to share in his glory. He wants to be seated with you on this glorious throne. That's what he's destined you for. But he still gives you a choice. And so this is what I want us to do. Right now, if you know, as we've been talking, search your own heart right now. You know, yeah, that great prostitute is sitting on the throne of my heart. And I don't want her there anymore. Just stand up.